Students, this lesson is going to be the vocabulary that you were supposed to read about and define for the baby lab. This is the vocabulary that's going to help you understand genetics. There is an assignment attached to it where you have to watch this lecture and fill out the notes as you are listening and reading. That assignment is right here. So as you watch the lecture, you fill out the blanks, which I will go over. Um, in the presentation. So really quick, you should know right now what traits are, and genetics is the study of how traits, physical characteristics are passed from parent to offspring. So just like the baby lab, you simulated that the mom and dad were passing on their traits, their characteristics from themselves to their offspring, which is the biological term for children. When we're talking about animals and things like that, we use the word offspring. We're talking about humans, we talk about children. So right here, we have the different traits, the color of feathers, the the color of their wool, the monkeys, length of tail, and obviously humans, the ability to roll your tongue, dimples, the butt chin, as people say, the little indentation in the chin, and a cleft chin, and then curly hair or curliness. Now, how are traits determined? They are determined by what are called genes. Genes, as described here, is a segment of DNA that determines a trait. So right here we have a diagram. The body is always copying DNA and making new cells. Inside the nucleus of eukaryotic organisms, we have our DNA, and they are packed in structures called chromosomes. Chromosomes are made of DNA and protein, and they contain genes. This gene could be for a protein that determines a characteristic. So when we're talking about genes, we're talking about segments of DNA that are part of chromosomes. And we have a specific number of chromosomes, and those chromosomes have genes for specific traits. Chromosomes come in pairs, pair meaning two, and there's a term called homologous pairs. Homologous refers to chromosomes that are the same shape, the same size, and they contain genes for the same trait. So right here, they are matching genes, one from the female parent and one from the male parent, and they have, normally, humans have 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, which makes 46. So in sexual reproduction, the man gives half of his chromosomes to the future offspring, and the woman gives the other half. So 23 chromosomes that have um, the genes for traits, the instructions for proteins are in these chromosomes. You get 23 from dad, 23 from mom, makes 46, and those 46 are what um, are make up a human. There are exceptions, which we'll go into later, but that's chromosomal disorders, chromosomal non-disjunction disorders, but we'll talk about that later on. This is just the intro. So here we have our chromosomes right there. How much time do I have? Okay, hopefully it's not too long. Here we have a pair of homologous chromosomes. One chromosome we got from the mom, one from the dad. They're homologous. Homo means same because they're the same length and they contain genes for the same traits. But the genes that the chromosome contains could be different, and this difference genes, these different versions are referred to as alleles. I'm going to say that again, alleles. Alleles, different genes, possibilities for the same trait. So right here we have, let's just make it up, one chromosome from the mom and the dad, and the dad has a gene, a section of DNA for blue eyes, and the mom has a section of DNA for brown eyes. So they have different alleles, different versions of the gene, but for the same trait, which is eye color. Eye color is the trait. the allele is the version of the gene for that trait. And they're called homologous because same size, same length, and they also contain the same location for the genes for the same trait, okay? In the baby lab, there was something referred to as dominant and recessive genes. So genes come in pairs, so there's always going to be either a recessive genes or dominant genes or a combination. So what dominant means is that the gene prevents the other gene from showing. In other words, the dominant gene is producing proteins that mask the proteins of the recessive gene. Genes that does not show, even though it is present, is recessive. So right here we have an example. I think they're mice. I think they're or puppies. I'm not sure. But the dominant color means that these organisms have the dominant gene, and that dominant gene masks the effect of the recessive color, which is this case pinkish. How do scientists or biologists determine or write out genes? They write them in letters. The dominant gene is an uppercase letter, and a recessive gene is a lowercase letter. So just like in the baby lab, where's the baby lab? The baby lab, the mom can give a dominant gene or recessive gene, and the dad can give a recessive and a dominant gene, and depending what the combination is, will determine what characteristics they have. So dominant is capital letter and recessive is lowercase letter. So in this case, the dominant color is dark and the recessive color is um, not dark or pinkish whitish. And they're used by, how do we designate them? We designate them as letters. You will, in the future, we'll be working on Punnett square problems that you've done before, but it's more detail. For example, these are like kind of like word problems. It's like straight thumb is dominant. That means the gene for straight thumb will mask the effects of the recessive gene of hitchhiker thumb. So straight thumb is dominant to hitchhiker thumb. Capital T, dominant is straight, and lowercase t is hitchhiker's thumb. It says right here, always use the same letter for the same alleles. So here we're talking about thumb, so they use the letter T. So right here it says, in order for the recessive trait, which is in this case hitchhiker thumb, we need two recessive genes to show the recessive trait, which is the hitchhiker thumb, the thumb that's, curved like that. And I have a hitchhiker thumb. So here we have two dominant genes will give the dominant trait, and pair with one dominant gene is enough to show the dominant trait, but the two recessive genes make up the recessive trait, which is hitchhiker thumb. Scientists have named these pairs of genes, remember one gene from the mom, one gene from the dad, as homozygous and heterozygous. So this is how you read it. Homozygous, homo means same, zygous referring to the zygote, the cell that's formed when the mom's DNA and the dad's DNA join together. Capital is homozygous dominant. We have two of the same dominant genes. Homozygous recessive is the same recessive genes, which is the two little letters. Homozygous dominant is two capital letters. Heterozygous or hybrid is when we have the two different genes. We have both the dominant and the recessive, and most of the time in the examples in the beginning of this unit, if it has the dominant gene, it will show the dominant trait. So right here we have a black dog. It could either be homozygous dominant, and since black is dominant, it's a black, or it could either be a heterozygous, a dominant gene for blackness, and then it is going to be black. Or in this case, the dog can also be homozygous recessive. White is recessive, so you need two recessive genes, and the dog is white. This is why sometimes people can have genes for traits that they don't have themselves, and their children can have traits that they don't have themselves, which is something that we will explore a lot in this unit. Last thing is you need to know the difference between genotype and phenotype. This video is long. Anyway, you'll have time to watch it. Genotype refers to what genes do they have. Do they have two dominant genes? Do they have one dominant and one recessive? Or they have two recessive? So right here on the baby lab, this is the genotype. It shows what genes, what alleles they have. The phenotype is the physical appearance that is determined from the genotype. So right here, the genotype, the genes are right here, and these genes code for, I'm assuming that the trait is fur color. So you need to know the difference, and how I remember it is genotype refers to genes, what genes they have, which are represented by letters, and phenotype, PH, photo, physical, if you take a photo of someone, you see your physical appearance. These terms will help you understand the baby lab more. The baby lab more, for example, you can say the baby is heterozygous for face shape, and its genotype is big R, little r, and the phenotype is round shape. So what you'll do is you'll fill in the blanks, and you'll be forced to read it and fill it in, and that is going to be your notes. So hopefully the video is clear, and you need to understand this in order to be successful in this unit. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully you understand it.